Welcome to Mysteries to Die For, and this toe tag. I am TG Wolff, and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is normally a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. Today is a bonus episode that we call a toe tag. It's the first chapter from a fresh release in the mystery, crime, or thriller genre. And today's featured release is On the Horns of Death by Eleanor Kuhns. All right. Juggling a couple computer screens here, so we will let that one rest. We will look over at this one and dive in to chapter 1. Late again. I hurried down the stony slope into the caves under Knossos. Even from the top of the twisty path, I could hear the grunting and the nervous kicking of the cage walls by agitated bulls. I increased my speed despite the slippery footing. I could smell the thick, coppery scent of blood, far more intense than the usual odor of damp rock. Why was there blood? Something terrible was happening. The oil lamps in the center of the cave cast a dim, smoky light, but there were several enough to see by. Although the bulls were restless, most of the bull leapers were crowded around the foremost pen. "What's going on?" I asked Araphia and Obelix as I reached the stone floor. Araphia and Obelix had helped fill the hole left by the loss of my sisters. Araphia rolled her eyes at me and shrugged. "I don't know." The short, sturdy girl, her skin the color of ripe figs. Obelix was taller and paler and so slim she looked like a boy from the back. Like me, they tied their hair back into braids. "I'm busy here," Araphia continued. She was helping Obelix pull her skirt over her loincloth, and I guess the older girl had unexpectedly gotten her monthly. It was always an inconvenience for us women on the team. "Can I help?" I asked. Araphia shook her head. Glad to be excused, I was burning with curiosity. I hurried across the stone floor toward the cluster of older bull dancers by the cage. Ready for the upcoming ceremony, they wore only loincloths and boots. "Something's upset the bulls," Gio said with a frown, running a hand over his bald head. He had trained all of us. "Especially the bull chosen for the sacrifice." Elamon glanced anxiously at the pen. He was the most experienced of us, but recently received an injury that left him skittish. I dropped my metal belt on the floor with a clatter and went to join the team. The bull in the pen was white, a pure white like the foam that came ashore from the sea. The largest and strongest of the Amal, he had been chosen for a performance at the Harvest Festival today. After the 6 days of the celebration, he would be sacrificed to the goddess. Other sacrifices would be made throughout to the dying god to thank him for the grape harvest and the wine he taught us how to make. But this bull, the greatest of all, would be sacrificed last. I approached the pen. The strikes against the wooden planks had loosened several. I tried to squeeze into the throng at the front, but no one would move away enough to let me through. I went around to the side and peered through a crack. The white bull was trotting around the pen, lashing his tail, kicking up his front feet, and grunting angrily. But he did not come near this side. Why not? I crouched down to peer through a larger gap at the bottom. And there, right in front of me, was the body of a man. I gasped and fell back. "Gios," I said in a trembling voice. When he did not hear me, I raised my voice. "Gios!" "What, Martis?" He sounded harried. "Come here," I said. "There's a body inside the pen." "What? Who is it?" "I don't know." I shook my head. I hadn't wanted to look. The body appeared to have been both gored and trampled by the bull. I think this is why the bull is so nervous. Gios came around the corner. Although at 16, I stood taller than him by several inches. Now he stared down at me as I sat on the rock floor. "Are you sure?" He sounded disbelieving. "Why would anyone join a bull in a pen? These are not tame animals." "I don't know." I scooted backwards so he could crouch down beside me. Groaning, he lowered himself first to one knee and then to the other. Cautiously, using both hands, he collapsed to a sitting position. From there, he looked through the breach between the weather wooden boards. "By the goddess," he muttered. "You're right. How could this happen?" He struggled to rise. "We've got to get that body out of there. None of the bulls will settle." Turning, Gio shouted at the other bull dancers, "One of you, go fight Tinos." As a high priestess's consort and the Wannix who served as the chief administrator of Knossos and its environs, Tinos would be responsible for investigating this tragedy. I rose shakily to my feet and peered into the pen next to the one occupied by the white auroch. This one was empty. Glad to have a problem to focus on, I said, "Maybe we can put the bull in here. And this wall," I gestured to the partition that we'd been looking through, "is already damaged." Gios glanced into the empty pen and then turned his gaze on the battered fence. "Perhaps, but we need to pull the body out first. Once that is gone, maybe the bull will settle down." By now, the other bull dancers had joined us. Eleanor shouldered me out of the way. "The board are already damaged," he said. "Maybe we can pull them away and slide the body through." Gios nodded, and his eyes shifted to the pen behind me. "We can take some of those pieces and use them to barricade the hole afterwards." As Elamon wrenched the boards away from the bottom of the cage, Tryphony grabbed the victim's arm to pull him through. And after a few fertile seconds, Theos, one of the other men, knelt down to help him. The body awkwardly inched forward. I could barely watch. I could see that several bones were shattered, and his arms flopped limply behind him. Once he was free, we bustled around, gathering wooden planks to place over the gap. I didn't believe the bull could escape through the narrow opening at the bottom, but we covered it nonetheless. No one wanted an angry animal charging around the caves, and he was still not settling down. Of course, the smell of blood hung heavily in the air. "What happened?" Araphia asked as she and Oblix approached us. Before Gios could reply, excited chatter from the youngest of our team, all still congregated at the entrance to the arena, distracted us. Gios hurried around the pen, the rest of us following. Tinos had arrived. He was clad in a long robe banded with diagonal stripes of red and blue and wore his ceremonial knife on a belt around his waist. Apparently, he'd been pulled away from an important ritual. "What happened?" he asked. He, gesturing to Kurgis, told me you discovered a body in the bull's pen. "That's right," Gios said. "I sent him to you." In his formal clothing, Tinos seemed older and much more serious than the man I knew and liked. "Show me," he said. Gios glared at the kids. "Stay here," he said firmly. "This is not something any of you should see." 13-year-old Kosti curled his lip mutinously, but didn't argue. "I'll watch them," Oblix offered. She was quite pale. Araphia glanced at her. "We both will," she said. I did not offer. Although I did not want to look at the body, I did want to be near Tinos. I quickly joined the line of bull dancers following him and Gios to the side of the bullpen. Tinos stared at the battered and bloody remains on the floor for several seconds and heaved a sigh. "Who discovered the body?" he asked. "Martis," Gios said. Tinos shot me a look from under his thick black eyebrows. This was not the first time I had witnessed a violent death. "Of course it would be," he said. "I could smell the blood when I got here," I said, rushing into a speech. "And the bull was upset and angry, and they," I gestured to Elamon and Tryphony, "were here by the pen." Tinos glanced at the bull dancers, and then his gaze flicked to the pen where the white bull could be heard snorting and shuffling. "I see." He turned to Gios. "That white bull can't be used in the ceremonies now." "I know," Gios agreed. "He's been tainted, but we have a few others." He pointed to the pens at the back of the cave. "Backups. The second choice is black, though, not white." Tinos nodded. "He will have to be the one. A bull that murdered a man is no fit sacrifice to the goddess." I thought of all the bull leapers who'd been gored or trampled by a bull during the ceremony and wondered why wounding or a death in the course of a performance was acceptable to the goddess. But this had not happened during the goddess-sanctioned ritual? What possessed him to enter the cage? Tinos wondered aloud, pushing his hair to the back. When no one replied to what was clearly a question without an answer, he asked, "Does anyone recognize him?" I don't think any of us really examined him, Gios admitted apologetically. Tinos raised his brow and looked around at us. Theos and Kurgis, the newer bull dancers, shook their heads and backed away. I refused to show such weakness in front of Tinos. I did not want him to think less of me. So I steeled myself and stared down at the body. Eleman cut through the crowd and joined me. It was difficult to recognize the victim through the blood and the bruising. I thought his skin was naturally darker than the fair Eleman, but I couldn't be sure. Finally, Eleman shook his head and stepped away to join the others. I continued staring at the body a few seconds longer, not at the face, but at the kilt around the hips. We all wore loincloths during the bull dancing. It was necessary to move freely, and we did not wear clothing like long skirts that would catch on the bull's horns. The victim's garment was subtly different, longer and decorated with blue stripes. I know who that is, I said, my voice breaking. It's Doozy. All right, so that is chapter 1 of On the Horns of Death by Eleanor Kuhns. So now here's my review. On the Horns of Death is a historical mystery. 16-year-old Martis volunteers as a bull dancer in Knossos on the Isle of Crete. An ordinary day of practice turns dark when she discovers the body of another dancer inside the bullpen. But why would he climb into the pen? Answer: murder. Bottom line, On the Horns of Death is for you if you like amateur sleuths and the rich sights, scents, and sounds of ancient Greece. Alrighty. So the heart of this story is our nosy body in training, Martis. She is constantly putting her nose in where it doesn't belong, but for all the right reasons. And people talk to her. She's a little too daring for her own good, which makes for excellent reading. The supporting cast here works well. We have Tinos, who is the high priestess's consort and investigate deaths, and Martis is seriously crushing on him. Then there's her mother, who tries to be patient and supporting, but is pulling her hair out as her daughter repeatedly runs toward danger. Martis has friends, who are all bull dancers, although in this book, they're also the main suspects. The world building of Knossos hit the right balance for me between painting a picture and turning into an anthropologist's journal entry. There's plenty of detail on dress, food, and traditions to enable the reader to see Knossos, but it's done in the context of Martis' sleuthing without long passages that are just descriptive. And you got a little bit of taste of that there in the first chapters. She's describing sort of how they're dressed with the loincloths and the boots and stuff. The mystery plot was driven by character interviews with alibis excluding suspects rather than evidence pointing to a bad guy. It's a little bit of an old school mystery telling style. In the end, Martis, and for that matter Tinos, do not solve the mystery themselves, but are drawn into it as the bad guy acts out, and in the course of doing that reveals themselves. You notice how careful I was with my adjectives and adverbs and pronouns there so that you don't know who did it. You have to read the book. The logic of Martis' actions are solid. She pushes. When one door closes, she opens a window. Even a severe dressing down by Tinos doesn't suppress her investigation for long. The strength of the logic of the bad guy's action starts out strong with the first murder, but for me it tapered off a bit as the body count rose. This is the second book in the series, and I did not read the first. This mystery mostly stood alone. For certain witnesses, there were definitely references back to the deaths of Martis' sisters, which, as you heard, she alluded to even in this first chapter, which I assume happened in the first book. I did not find that I was missing backstory or information that I needed to enjoy this one. So in my opinion, you can start your Greek journey right here. All in all, I found Martis to be an engaging hero and found myself wondering what trouble she was going to get into next whenever I was away from the book. I look forward to reading her future exploits and hope Knossos can survive her. On the Horns of Death was released by Severn House and is promoted by Partners in Crime Tours and is available wherever fine books are sold. There's a link in the show notes to Amazon. So let's meet Eleanor. Eleanor Kuhns is a previous winner of the Minotaur Books Mystery Writers of America First Crime Novel Competition for her book, A Simple Murder. The author of 11 Will Reese mysteries, she is now a full-time writer after a successful career as the assistant director at the Goshen Public Library in Orange County, New York. You check the show notes for all of her socials. So Partners in Crime Tours represents a network of 300-plus bloggers offering tailor-made virtual book tours and marketing options for crime, mystery, and thriller writers from around the world. Founded in 2011, PICT offers services for both well-established and best-selling authors, as well as for those just starting out their careers. PICT prides itself on tailored packages for authors with a personal touch from their tour coordinators. For more information, check out their website, partnersincrimetours, all one word, .com. Join us next week for Season 8 Games People Play. We celebrate Halloween with the game of Candyland and the story Death in Candyland by Kira Jacobs. Thanks everybody for listening. Check out On the Horns of Death by Eleanor Kuhns. All right, Jack, take us out.